Thank you for joining us in finding God in the world of video games. And there's an old Jedi saying, impatience leads to worry, worry leads to fear, and fear leads to releasing a game that was so broken and buggy that even the dark side wouldn't have anything to do with it.
I don't think that's the exact same.
I feel like I saw it once. It was on an episode of Clone Wars. You haven't watched it.
Okay.
So, no, but that, honestly, we're going to talk about CyberPunk 2077, which was supposed to be a genre-defining experience that broke the mold of sci-fi gaming the same way that The Witcher previously did for fantasy games. But the only ground they ended up breaking was being the first game in history that came out so broken that it was pulled down from the Sony online store for purchase, and it united both Xbox and PlayStation to give all consumers who purchased a digital copy of the game a full refund. That's not exactly the history-making moment that CD Projekt Red had in mind when they finally released their, what was supposed to be, magnum opus. And I want to, before we get too deep into this, say that we're not trying to bag on CD Projekt Red or the game specifically, and honestly we haven't played it. We're just commenting on the fact that this news that happened, this did in fact happen. Whether you're interested in the game or not, this is a history-changing moment in which a digital game is being refunded by both Microsoft and Sony. That has never happened before.
You know, and it's crazy because Sony and Microsoft actually agreed on something.
That doesn't happen often.
They both aligned pretty quickly that CyberPunk was pretty much dead on arrival and needed to be flushed down the toilet with urgency.
That's disgusting.
But seriously though, what went wrong?
So
what happened?
8 years ago, it doesn't really feel like 8 years ago, CyberPunk was unveiled to the masses and quickly became a game that was occupying some serious hard drive space in every gamer's mind. And as that release date continued to get closer, the excitement level reached a fever pitch, which culminated, as I'm sure most of us remember, in an unforgettable experience by the one and only Keanu Reeves as he announced his participation as a primary character in the game at an epic E3 event. But even he could not save this game from the stress fractures that were about to be revealed, as one release date, followed by another, got pushed back. The assumption was that these delays were merely adding some final coats of polish on yet another remarkable masterpiece from the CD Projekt Red team, and we figured we'd all be safely inhabiting the neon-drenched streets of Night City soon. It was just a matter of time. But we were also very, very wrong.
And what happened next will probably go down in gaming history for generations to come, told as a cautionary tale to future game publishers and developers as they attempt to craft their own dreams without flying too close to the sun. Now, early reviews looked amazing as critics praised the narrative and visual accomplishments of the development team. But, I mean, those review copies were played on high-end PCs and next-gen gaming consoles, not the base model PS4 and Xbox One system.
And you might say, well, I don't remember having a problem with my copy of the game. Well, maybe you didn't because you weren't playing on one of those. But there are over 150 million PlayStation 4 and original Xbox One systems that are still being played right now.
That's what we still play.
And those gamers received a dramatically different experience than their PC and next-gen hardware brethren. We're not just talking about some grainy textures and rough visuals either. These were game-breaking bugs, entire missions that simply wouldn't work, and frame rate issues that in many cases were reported to be literally making players physically ill.
And, you know, all of the goodwill that CD Projekt Red had previously earned seriously went up in smoke instantly. And despite the hard work of the development team to get a patch out that would, you know, solve many of the issues that were...
a little over a week ago. Yeah,
the issues that were plaguing gamers, the damage was unfortunately already done, and refunds were already being demanded and given, and
Metacritic scores. I was going to play it off like it was supposed to happen that way, but then you looked at me in surprise because I saved you. So, but the Metacritic scores plummeted, and no matter how hard they work to restore faith in the title now, we have to admit it, the brand name has been tarnished.
Unfortunately.
So let's cut to the heart of the matter. As much as it would have made people upset, this game, it probably should have been delayed again, at least on the current generation consoles. It wasn't ready, and anyone can see that now. Irreparable damage has been done to both the franchise as well as the development studio because they were so committed to hitting this release date after so many embarrassing delays. Now, would it have hurt for them to delay it, at least on the PS4 and Xbox One versions? Of course. But it would have saved them the unprecedented indignity of being removed from digital store shelves and setting refund records. Now, we can blame this on maybe hubris, but the reality is, the CyberPunk team was not trying to unite the entire gaming world in hating on their game. They truly wanted everyone to enjoy their experience. They simply didn't demonstrate the patience needed when taking on the challenge of developing a game that would be played not on one, not on two, but over 10 unique hardware configurations.
Between the multiple different models and corresponding differences in power and architecture of the PS4, the Xbox, PS5, the Xbox Series S and X, not to mention the myriad of different PC hardware options, I don't even want to, I can't even.
Won't.
There's so many. I don't have enough energy. This was already an almost impossible mission. They should have taken the time to ensure each experience measured up to their quality standards, even if it meant another unpopular delay. But their impatience ultimately made them famous just for the wrong reasons.
And interestingly enough, our issues with patience are at the heart of more of our problems than we often realize. Many times, I have tried to understand the root cause issues of my own sins and moral failures, and now, in retrospect, it's easy to see where I went wrong. While it is true that all of our sins have their basis in our own selfish desires, we see that in James 1:14, Jesus never shamed anyone for wanting to have their needs met. As a matter of fact, in Matthew 6:8, Jesus told us God knows our needs. And in the Lord's Prayer, he specifically told us to ask the Lord for our daily bread. So wanting something, especially a need, is not a sin. But choosing to take those things before we are supposed to have them is a big problem, a lesson I have learned many times the hard way. The right thing at the wrong time is still a sin, and it can have catastrophic results. And the best example of this is in the case of King Saul that we see in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verses 7 through 14. I won't read all of these verses, but it's a fascinating, I think it's a very fascinating story, so I'll summarize it for you. The people of Israel during this entire selection were hiding in caves. They were in fear of their enemy, and King Saul was waiting on the arrival of the prophet Samuel, who was the person who had anointed him as king in the first place. Samuel was supposed to come and make a sacrifice that would ensure the Lord's blessing on this upcoming battle. But Samuel was running late, and he didn't make his promised release date. And so Saul didn't believe he could wait it.
Rather than wait for the right timing and trust the Lord, Saul chose to just release the game. And in this case, make the sacrifices to God that were not his to make. He wanted God's blessings without waiting for God's timing, and no sooner did he complete his act of impatience than Samuel showed up. Not at the same time Saul wanted, but at the time that God had appointed. And the result? Well, Saul would lose the kingdom he was desperately trying to protect. Not because Saul didn't want God's blessing, but because he wanted it on his terms and on his timeline.
His impatience was the impetus for the downfall of his entire kingdom. Now, Saul did end up winning this particular battle, but he lost the war in the process. Now, hopefully you're ready for this, because I have an eye-opening realization for you, and maybe you've never heard this before. But if you look at the 10 Commandments, the 10 Commandments that are in Exodus chapter 20, the last 5 of them actually have their basis in patience. Now, you may have never seen it that way before. We're more accustomed to viewing this as thou shalt not, and a list of all the things not to do. So let's go through these. So when we say you shall not murder, what it's actually saying is what we see in Romans 12:19. Wait for the Lord to bring justice, because vengeance is his. When it says you shall not commit adultery, what it's saying is Proverbs 5:15. Wait for your marital partner to satisfy your needs. When it says you shall not steal, 1 Timothy 6:6, it's saying wait until you can afford what you want. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. John 8:32, we see wait because it's the truth that is going to set you free. Now here's a long one. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, your neighbor's wife, his male servant, his female servant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. What is that saying? Philippians 4:19. Wait for the Lord, because it's his job to supply all of your needs. Now, I will say, during my life, I did not set out to break any of these commandments. I looked at them as, oh, these are the 10 commandments. You definitely don't mess with those. But due to my impatience with the Lord's plan for my life, I found myself in violation of many of these. And along with those who I hurt, I paid a heavy price each and every time. I didn't have any intention of committing these sins when I woke up that morning. The reality was, it was my impatience that led to my desire to take even the good things that the Lord had for me before it was time for me to actually have them.
Now, I would encourage each of us to reflect on our own decisions before we judge to the makers of CyberPunk too harshly. Have we always waited patiently for the goodness of the Lord to reveal itself in his timing?
Me?
Or, I sure haven't, or have we also made the mistake of buying the cart before the horse? Put it on a credit card that we had no hope of paying off, and then topped it off by wishing we had someone else's cart because it looked roomier and had a leather interior? A leather, is that what you're saying?
Leather interior,
Leather
yeah.
interior.
It's an upgrade that cars have, not ours. But,
A cart?
Nice cars.
I think it says cart.
No,
a cart
this is an analogy. I'm going
Oh,
cart to car. I'm bringing the past to the
Because
future.
you didn't have me
It
say
was
car.
funny. No, because he was talking about carts. It's the cart before the horse.
At least
The
we're
whole
explaining
thing.
it now because I didn't
No,
understand
because
why I was
now when
reading
you have
it.
to explain the joke, it's not funny. It was hilarious.
Okay.
So, I'll read your line for you just so that way it
Oh,
helps
we're
keep
gonna
it funny.
restart.
Yeah, we have to because it leads
Now
into my
he
next
needs
part.
help.
So have we also made the mistake of buying the cart before the horse, put it on a credit card we had no hope of paying off, and then topped it off by wishing we had someone else's cart because it looked roomier and had a leather interior? See how
Why
funny
does it
that
sound
was
like
now?
a commercial? He sounds like he's talking
That's
for
the
an
whole
infomercial.
point. It was supposed to be fun. But then we doubled down on our mistakes
I
by
can't.
killing our neighbor's horse when nobody was looking,
Oh.
and then we lied about it. Okay, maybe now that's gone off the
I was
deep
gonna
end with all the
say.
horse murder and everything. But I think we're all on the same page essentially now. It is our impatience that often leads to our greatest mistakes. And much like the flawed release of CyberPunk, even the best of intentions can be sabotaged when we choose to chase self-imposed deadlines rather than wait for the timing of God to line up.
All right, so here's the big question. What deadline have you or someone else placed on you that is pressuring you to compromise on your beliefs? Is it the pressure to get married, or have kids, start your career, buy a house, upgrade your vehicle, or any number of other good pursuits that in and of themselves are fine, but outside of God's timing can result in shipwreck?
I have been Saul many times, seizing the moment instead of waiting on God's timing. And each time I have dropped an epic cyberpunk level nuclear warhead in my life and the lives of others as a result. It is my prayer that this encourages you today to avoid the pitfalls of impatience. The siren song of releasing your game early may be waning on you, but only the Lord's timing is the right time. Impatience is the root cause of half of the sins listed in the 10 Commandments. And to be honest, it's actually at the root of breaking the first commandment, to have no other gods before Him.
When we place our trust in ourselves, our plans, our schedules, or anyone else's guidance, we have placed these above God. It is the equivalent of telling the Lord, oh, thanks for the idea. Now let me handle all the details and I got this. Don't you worry about it. I mean, that just doesn't sound right. We may not intend it that way, but the reality is that the moment we take Him out of the driver's seat, we have committed a violation of the very first rule.
Now, perhaps you have already made mistakes of impatience that you're currently burdened with. I know I certainly have, but it is never too late to turn even these burdens over to the Lord. He died for all of our sins, past, present, and future. How do I know that? Because I'm not 2,000 years old. I know I look great for it, but I'm not. When He died, all of my sins were still in the future. I hadn't even been born yet. And unless you're 2,000 years old, and you kind of look it a little bit, but you weren't either. He died knowing we were going to impatiently make a mess of our lives, and he did it anyway. And He is still ready to make a masterpiece out of our mess.
Give Him your messy, bug-filled, broken cyberpunk choices today, no matter how tempting it is to think you can still fix it if you just try a little harder, because you can't, none of us can, our plans, just like Cyberpunk's release date, were doomed from the day they were announced. We just didn't know it at the time.
And all the Keanu Reeves hype in the world couldn't save Cyberpunk from its own cardinal sin, the sin of impatience. No amount of additional resources, good intentions, or hopeful dreams will change our path either. And Keanu Reeves isn't coming to help us either. Only
Really?
patient. No, well, I hope so, but I don't. He hasn't returned to any of my calls and blocked him on Twitter. Only patient submission to the will of the Master will right our course. As David found in Psalm 27, it is at our point of tapping out that his strength will be revealed in our situations. We'll read that as we close. I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, say.